Don't ever be in a position where you're desperate.
One of the biggest fears, actually, our delegates who attend our workshops talk about is being ripped off by builders. You have to have the confidence to price it up.
If someone asks for 50% up front of the job, you're basically just funding the cash flow.
That's just an app.
You start building up a photographic record of contractor vans in your local area. Look out for those red flags. I would always default to we pay you by card. When you do find them, look after them, treat them well, pay them well. So we need to move on to something else, Caroline. What are we moving on to?
We decided that after the pain of this last development, that actually we were going to take...
Every month on the second Saturday, we run an online networking session where you can meet other active investors face to face. And 3 times a year, we bring everyone together at live in-person events. Spaces are always limited, so if you want to be part of it, check out thispropertylife.co.uk/events and secure your spot today. Hello and welcome to This Property Life. I'm Nick Claydon and I'm here today with my partner in all things life and business, Caroline Claydon. Hi, Caroline. How are you today?
Oh, I am exactly the same as I was 5 minutes ago when we were speaking in the kitchen about doing this podcast. I'm fine. I just look at myself at the mirror in the camera right now going, wow, we clearly haven't set out to do this today, but hey, we're here now doing it. Let's get on. This is the 4th in the series, right?
Just felt like the moment.
It felt like the moment. Seize the day and all that.
The 4th and final in our little mini series of controlling the uncontrollables. And this one is all about working with builders and contractors.
Yay. One of the biggest fears, actually, our delegates who attend our workshops talk about is being ripped off by builders and or having shoddy workmanship carried out. So I think this is really relevant, and no matter how much experience you have, it's going to be a challenge.
You can never ever take your eye off the ball when it comes to that. Look, going to set this all out early, right? We're going to talk about lots of experiences, both ourselves and some of the people that we've worked with. For those of you listening who are the industry, contractors wise, we've worked with some excellent contractors, so we do want to, dispel the myth that, everyone's a cowboy builder. That's not the case at all. We work really, really, professional, well-regarded and contractors who've done really great work for us. So I'm just going to put that out there.
It's a very short list though, right? I've got a longer list of ones to avoid, put it that way.
Yeah, look, I think as you go through this property life, I think as you go through that, you come across people who are great, start off great, and then something happens in their life and something, and they go off the rails. Businesses, that you work with that have great reputations, that something changes and that reputation changes. It's very much a people thing.
Yeah.
So there are things that you can do for yourself to identify red flags and to make sure you listen to any little warning signs. Listen to the little amygdala in the back of your head that flashes warning signs.
Hey UK property people, we'd love to have you join us at This Property Life Networking. It's a no-guru friendly community. Our network gets a private WhatsApp group for daily advice and deal sharing, monthly online networking with live market updates and in-person events every year. Hit the link in the description below, join today and start building real connections with active property investors.
Well, let's talk about what is a good contractor. What is it that we would classify as good, right? Because your idea of good and someone else's idea of good could be different. I mean, all I'm looking for is high quality work, reasonably priced, turning up when they say they're going to turn up, and
seeing the job through,
finishing it, finishing
it to the end and in a timely fashion. So that's what a good contractor is. Let's just frame it for anyone who's just starting out. So when we talk about contractor, we're talking about anyone from your kind of one-man band. They are normally men, one-person band. Van. Someone who's probably a joiner or plumber by trade that can turn their hand to most trades. And then do small jobs for you. Like they could probably do one buy-to-let renovation because they can do the joinery, they can do a bit of plumbing, and they can do some plastering, painting, decorating, and get it all kind of done. They might bring in someone they know who's an electrician to do those bits. So anything from that to your specialist contractors like your electricians or professional plasterers or people that just do one thing, but they do it on a bigger scale.
Damp specialists,
roofing specialists, scaffolders, all of it. There's a whole remit of people who work in the contracting business that do very specialist roles. And then you've got your kind of what you call your main contractor type model, where you've got a business that does everything in-house. So when you're doing bigger projects, you might go to a main contractor who would do everything. And they would have their own teams of joiners and plumbers and sparkies and bring in other trades if they don't have them in-house. So it kind of covers, when we talk about contractors, we could be talking about anyone within that entire remit of essentially people who do work on your properties.
Yeah. Anyone with a trade, which, by the way, is AI proof. So
if you've seen any of the advanced robotic stuff going on, that will have a shelf life too. But yeah, just a slight sideline into the AI. I listen to a lot of podcasts and things about AI. I'm fascinated by it. And there was a guy, Jeffrey Hinton, I think, who was, one of the chief AI engineers at Google, I think. And I think this was on the Diary CEO podcast team, but asking, what would you teach your kids to do, bearing in mind, the AI revolution is coming? He said, be a plumber. And he was deadly serious. And I've read several things about the thing that the future millionaires are going to be contractors.
And you know what? Based on the experience that we've had, if you are delivering on the deliverables we've just said, which is high quality, priced well, do what you say you're going to do and finish it on time, boy, you have a captive market and you would do very, very, very well. But obviously, it's not going to be easy. And we're looking at buying businesses and opportunities that are going to be AI proof, and the trades is something that's very much in the forefront of our mind because it's a nice synergy with everything else we do, but it does heavily rely on people, which is a challenge in itself. So we'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that
later.
And you've just kind of given away a little nuggets, which we're going to talk about towards the end of this podcast, about what our next little series within a series is going to be about. So we'll come back to that at the end.
If you're loving this episode, don't just listen, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss our weekly property chats, deal breakdowns and market updates. It takes a couple of seconds, it's free, and it helps us bring you even better guests and property chat.
So let's start with, I think the biggest question we get from a lot of our, delegates and people that come and work with us and we help to get into property. What are their biggest fears? What are their main questions when it comes to builders? I think a lot of people get scared by I get this a lot when we're starting out. We're teaching people how to, really think about your strategy and what properties you're going to buy and raising money on that side. And a lot of the time, the biggest question is, how do I find builders? You go, well, you don't need them yet. You only need one when you've got a property deal. Okay, so don't walk before you run. But it is a valid point because a lot of people, I think, maybe worked in corporate life, don't really know where to start. How do I even find them?
Well, a common mistake people make is actually trying to price up what a refurb's going to cost with a builder before they've even put an offer in. That's in itself a common mistake people make because they're not confident on guesstimating how much a refurb should be because they haven't got the experience of working with a builder over and over and over again. And so they might get a builder through a friend of a friend, get that builder along to try and price up what the refurb is going to be. Then they put the offer in, the offer's rejected, and that relationship with the builder is going to be damaged because he's just given up his time and he's not getting a job at the end of it. So he's not going to do that many times over in the hope that 1 in 10 you're going to get and he'll get the job. So it kind of goes cap in hand with the pricing of the job and finding a good contractor. You have to have the confidence to price it up yourself.
For people starting out, it's kind of an easy thing to defer to someone else. I don't know, so I'll get a builder to come and have a look. And that to me is basically deferring responsibility of the project. It's like your project and it is it comes under your remit as the investor to understand, how a refurb is done and what it costs.
Yeah, but like you say, if you're like a white collar worker and you're sitting in a corporate job and you've now got a 3-bed buy-to-let renovation to do, you're not going to know how much to budget for a kitchen and the fitting or the bathroom and the fitting and the windows and the carpets. You're just not. So this is where you have to lean on people who do know that stuff without it going to the builders. So your network, asking for, recommendations or, our closed Facebook group, our networking group, this is what I've got to work to carry out. How much should I guesstimate? this to cost, and also the location of where it is. Labor costs are different around the UK, whereas material top costs are kind of universal. So I think leaning on your network is probably your first port of call there.
Yeah, but it's also absolutely, your network's lots of great information within it, people who've been where you are starting out, but also how difficult is it to go on to B&Q.com and look at what the price of things is. People are often surprised when I say you could get a bathroom suite for under £500. They're like,
Yeah,
what?
that's
Okay,
true.
well, go and have a look on B&Q. You'll see it there.
Yeah,
So
that's true. But again, the cost of the fitting it, that
correct.
is
The
a bit
labor
more
system.
plucked from thin air. That's harder.
Yeah, it is. But there's definitely things you can do to start familiarizing yourself early on with what things generally cost. So
That's
go
true.
and have a look at, places like B&Q. Go and have a look at, the
Howden
other
kitchens.
DIY. Yeah, DIY kitchens, look at magnet kitchens. And you'll be quite surprised often, I think, particularly for those of you based more down south who, could easily spend thousands of pounds on a bathroom. When you go and have a look at the budget end of the ranges, you'll see what you can get done for a couple of grand when you're operating somewhere else. So definitely start familiarizing yourself with what the budget end of things cost, because that's where we're operating, certainly with buy-to-lets, is going to be at the more budget end of things.
Yeah, I think so. So that really is probably, I think, hand in hand with the fear of the builder being ripped off by the builder, because if you don't have a clue about how much something should cost, when they come back with their quote, you're not going to know if that's reasonable in the ballpark or not. So I think you do need to have a fair idea of what it should cost. And then, of course, it's all about securing who you think is going to be a good builder. So recommendations is obviously first port of call to find builders.
Talk to your letting agents in the regions where you operate. Something to be worried about. As I've said before, not all builders, I'm going to just keep making this point. Not every builder out there is looking to rip you off. Okay, that is not the case. However, if you are, let's say, based in London and you go to South Wales and you're looking at properties there and you're speaking to local builders there, you do have to factor in the London tax. I'm putting quote for those of you listening, I'm putting that in quote marks. You do have to factor in that, okay? Because if you're a local Welsh operator, builder, and you've got someone you perceive as being wealthy Londoner, are you going to probably put a little premium on? Are you going to charge that person the same as what you charge your local South Wales investor? Probably not. You're probably going to add a little bit of tax, quote marks again, to those numbers. So that's something that, you do have to be aware of if you are operating out of your area. And I'm going to say it, particularly if you have a London accent, it's not going to help. It's just reality.
Well, look, there's an Edinburgh tax.
Reality.
There's an Edinburgh tax.
We get it here with an Edinburgh tax. The same job. Often, we've had people to do some of our work come through from Glasgow, because as soon as you mention anything in Edinburgh to an Edinburgh-based builder or contractor, there's a bit of a premium on there, that doesn't exist maybe to the west in Glasgow. So it happens everywhere. It is something to be aware of. But this is where you as the investor have got to take on that challenge, and you have got to break into your local markets and basically become a bit of a local.
So you suggested speaking to letting agents, finding out builders' recommendations from them, also going to the local building merchants, seeing whose vans are out there, and the local Screwfix whose vans are sat in the car park. That gives you a nice little list of who's active, who's got busy work. Because red flag would be if you went to the good old yellow pages. I know that doesn't exist anymore, but the old fashioned yellow pages.
Have you heard of something called the internet?
I think the yellow pages might. No, it's not.
It doesn't exist.
Anyway, but like the good old fashioned, just Google, find a builder's name, and then suddenly you call them up and they're like, yeah, we can slot you in a couple of weeks' time. We've just got a job finishing. Like that to me is a red flag. If they're readily available for you, tells me that they're not busy enough, and therefore, if they're not busy enough, are they actually any good?
You're being a bit harsh. I'm going to say that's a yellow flag. It's a yellow flag. Come on. It's a flag, and you go, and ask a question. It might just be you got lucky and they're finishing a job and they have got a gap.
Yeah, no, that's true. But if this is your very first contact with them, you've never worked with them before, you haven't got a recommendation from anyone, you've just found them in the yellow pages /internet, then it's a red flag.
Did you use Ask Jeeves or AOL Messenger?
What was the thing that you used to have on your TV to find holidays and stuff? What was that called again?
Teletext.
Teletext. At least I'm not talking teletext. Anyway, showing my age now. So yes, I think if you have a recommendation from a letting agent on a builder that's good, and then they can slot you in 2 weeks' time because the job's going to end, then that isn't as bad. I'd feel a lot more comfortable with that. So busyness is good, although not great for us, of course, if you're wanting them to start within a couple of weeks. So time frame wise, when should we start looking for a builder? You really want to start looking for a builder the minute your offer is accepted.
Well, yeah, because you've got 3 to 4 months if you're using finance, which most people probably are. The best one in the world. It's going to take minimum 3 months to transact. For when an offer's accepted, probably 4.
Come on, it's going to be a bit quicker than that. I mean, I'm thinking still 8 to 12 weeks to completion.
No, it's not. It's 3 months. If you're using bridging, maybe quicker, but probably isn't. It's going to be 3 months. But anyway, you've got a period of time between having an offer accepted and getting a builder on board and locked in. So it's not anything to panic about not having, it's not a reason to not put offers in because you don't have builders. It's, get your offers in and then get out there. It's part of the process, get out there and find builders. So one thing when I'm out on mentorships around the country, which have been most parts of the country over the last 10, 15 years. One thing I always got my mentees to do when I'm working with is to just keep an eye out for those contractor vans that you see. It's the old reticular activating system. When you tell your brain, when you're out in your investment areas, right, notice contractor vans, you'll start seeing them everywhere. And you just have your phone handy and you just snap the photo, because they're generally, well, if they're any good, they'll have their name, their company name, and a phone number and an email address. Have you heard of email, Caroline? Yes. Email, yeah.
And they've got the little symbols for Instagram and
a
stuff.
Postal. They probably don't have a postal address on there.
No, I know. Okay, I'm not going to live that one down now.
Yeah, but so you have your phone. You start building up a photographic record of contractor vans in your local area, and then you've immediately got a database to start calling when you've got an opportunity. And then it's a question of, taking that contractor through a little bit of a process to identify, is that someone you want to work with? Any flags there? And we can talk through some of what they might be. And you can be asking them things like, what are their rates? What do they charge daily? Do they charge per job? How do they work?
So let's go through some of those questions, because I think this is actually important. I want to give the actual detail behind the questions that we would ask. So let's say I would want to be asking if they're open to me seeing any previous work. Is there any sites that they're working on at the moment that I could just pop along and have a little look at it? Because actually seeing them at work is brilliant, because you get to see how clean they keep the site or the property, how many bodies they've got there, how many people are working, the state of those workers, because that tells you a lot. Are they pristine and clean? They're not getting their hands dirty, or are they absolutely?
Have you ever seen a plasterer at work? Then I don't think they're never clean. Well, they probably are.
No, I know, but that's good. Means they're probably quite good at their job.
Yeah.
But no, I think
a clean site is important.
Yeah, it is. No, sweeping the floor and keeping the site clean is really important. Health and safety. When you turn up, are they following any kind of health and safety guidelines? I guess that's more appropriate on slightly medium to larger jobs. But if you're looking for someone to do a buy-to-let renovation, hopefully they're working on something at the moment you could just pop along and have a look at, even if that's just fitting a bathroom. Or can I have a wee look at how it's going for you? And then we can, grab a coffee and have a chat about the job that I've got. That helps build the rapport, but also it's a little bit of a decoy to you getting an eyeball on what they're doing right now and getting a feel for their business and how they like to operate. So that would be key for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, don't be afraid to ask them about pricing as well, there and then, see how they react.
They can get prickly because sometimes...
That's a bit of a flag for me, because they're like, why?
Why?
Well, why be pricky about it? It's like...
Well, because they haven't even seen the job. You're just a random that's just phoned up saying, oh, so-and-so recommended you. I've got a 3-bed buy-to-let that I want to renovate. What kind of pricing do you use? Do you tend to work on labour only plus a markup on materials, or do you price for the job? I mean, that is about as much in the pricing I would go to.
No, that's what I mean.
Rather than what is your price?
Yeah, okay. No, that's what I meant. Yeah, it's like, how do they like to work? How do they, they work? Because ways in which you can keep control of your costs would be for you to supply materials, and you buy the materials. You can use your 0% credit cards if they still exist. That's probably there with the Yellow Pages, isn't it? 0%
No,
low interest
0%
rate
credit
cards.
cards are there.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're still there.
Yeah.
Another question I ask is, do you have any full-time members of staff? How many staff do you have? What this tells you is not only how big their business is, but if they're willing to have full-time members of staff, then they're obviously confident in the cash flow coming into that business. It's obviously steady. If they just have boys that work with them, that price per job, then that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, but then you have an extra layer of manpower to manage, if you like. So although they might be the main contractor, if they are subbing in someone else to carry out some work, you're relying on that subby to be good. And if they are not, who does that fall on? The main contractor, or are you having to deal with that person too? You just need to be really clear on which part of the job are you taking control over, how many staff do you have, and what kind of skills do they have. So it might be that you've got a builder that does house extensions, and he employs a labourer, a joiner. He has a mate that's an electrician with his own electrician's business that comes in and does all of his work, and he's a plumber himself, something like that. Now that is quite a nice, smart little business, because he's keeping it to the plumbing for him. He's got a joiner on the books, and he's got a labourer to help keep the place clean and tidy, and then his mate's coming in to do the sparky work. I think that is a nice little setup. Whereas if he's like one man guy, and he's like, maybe he's the joiner, and he's getting everyone and his dog to come in and help. I guess it depends on how big your job is, on how comfortable you'd feel about that. What do you think?
It completely depends on the scale of the job, I think. Generally speaking, if we're talking about a buy-to-let refurb, really, a one-man operator who brings in, other people that he knows to do the bits he can't do, I think that's perfectly fine, as long as it's not going to delay your job. The thing, we'll get onto the more of the red flags as we go. But one thing early on to set out, I think, with your project is a timeline, and to be very upfront about, you need to finish this before you move on to something else. Because how a lot of contractors, particularly I would say the smaller contractors, will work, they have to line up, they're self-employed, so they have to line up other jobs. They can't just finish a job and then start looking for the next job. They have to try and, I'm looking at it from their perspective, they need to be working all the time. So you'll often find that there is a bit, what we've found, I think, historically, is that they probably say yes to maybe too many things, and they're trying to keep everyone happy. But what it can mean is that sometimes towards, and it always is towards like at the end of your job, suddenly they're not there. You're like, well, where are you? Oh yeah. I'm just at another job. I'll be back there this afternoon. And that they've kind of started another job. And it's the most frustrating thing that I think that we come across with this is you've got 80% of a job done, and then it just goes quiet for a bit, and you've just got this last bit to finish. It does happen. And I think one thing you can do, and what we would do up front, is to incentivize your contractor to finish on a date. Right, here's a date. Right, finish by that date, I will give you X cash bonus. Better to incentivize and punish for being late, I would say.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And there's only one thing these guys will listen to, and that is money and cocaine. But that's another story. I probably shouldn't have said that.
You've gone there.
I've gone there. Yeah, it's rife in that industry.
But they will also react to who's maybe shouting the loudest. So if they've got more than one job on, and you've got one client that's screaming at you to be there, and the other one being very passive about it, the path of least resistance means that they will turn up to the job where the client's screaming at them. Not that I'm saying you have to scream at people, but I'm saying take that out of the equation by incentivizing them to finish your job on time.
Yeah, it's really hard to say, look, I want you to promise that you're not going to start any other jobs until you've finished mine. They're of course going to say, yeah, of course I'm not going to do that, and then they will. I mean, I literally had a joiner going, I'm going to be leaving the job for a couple of hours because I've got to go and price up another job. And you're like,
I don't mind
what the hell,
reflected in the rate. It's like, well, if you're going to take 3 hours out of the day, I'm not paying you day rate. We're paying you to finish the job, and you get incentivized. You finish the job on time, you get an extra 500 quid bonus or whatever, depending on the scale of the project. And also, I think it's really important when you, particularly for those starting out or getting into their first few deals, is to be saying, look, I'm going to be doing multiple of these. It's not just one and you never see me again.
Yeah.
I've got another one lined up. I've got one after that. And I'm in a network where we can keep you busy. And that's what we always used to say when, for example, Rick and I were often in Liverpool at the same time doing similar kinds of projects. We would try and dovetail and line them up so that we'd found a good builder and we could keep him busy. Say, look, you've got this one, then you can just go straight onto Rick's one. By the time you've done that one, I'll have my next one ready to go.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that's quite important, I think, as well, is to show that you're not just fly by night. You're not just in and out and doing one. You're there professionally. You're doing it at scale.
Yeah.
And therefore you want
and
better
they love
rates.
that. They love that.
They love that because, they can map out their next few months of work if you can keep them busy.
No, they definitely like that promise of further work down the line. And they do want to do a good job more than...
But I say, really, really important for anyone doing this is that you have to educate yourself on the market for this. What do things actually cost so that you can ask good questions? So I remember once doing a viewing, and a builder come and walk around with me, and we were in like a not particularly nice part of Glasgow. Are there any nice parts? Yeah, there are a few nice parts, I think. No offense. That was a joke. Any Glaswegians listening? But yeah, no, it was in a low value area, 60. I think we're purchase price like 65K for a little flat there. I remember asking the builder, what would you spend on a kitchen here? What kind of kitchen we put in here? And he was like, oh yeah, I can get really good kitchens from wherever he said. And we'll probably be like a $4,000 kitchen plus, a couple of grand to put it in and everything else around it. I was like, so $6,000 on the kitchen, that's 10% of the value of this property on the kitchen. He was like, well, yeah, we want to put something nice in. I'm saying, no, we don't. That was a little test to see what he would do. It was like, look, actually, we can get a kitchen from Magnet for 800 quid plus a few extras, maybe looking at £1,200 all in. So that, and as soon as I said that, he was like, oh, right, I didn't realize we were going that, budget level. I said, well, yeah, we're here in this part of town. It's a 65K flat. Yes, it's budget. That's the level I'm at. And he was like, oh, right, I get you.
So this is it. The spec and the finish, you really have to nail down with your builder on what your expectation on spec is. So you've given a good example there of where you want the spec to be lower. But if you get the opportunity to go and see any of their work, then you can say, okay, I see that the level that you've done here, my expectation is I want to be a level up from that. Or let me take you to one that I finished not that long ago. That's the level I want it to be at. You need to give them something concrete to get their teeth into, like saying, I can get a kitchen for 1,800 quid all in for £2,000. That's, but even down to the faceplates for the electrics, the bog standard white, or do you want the brush chrome or the nice antique brass? You have to really spell out the level of finish that you're expecting on the refurb.
Well, it's like a kitchen isn't just a kitchen. You can have like a Magnet kitchen for £1,000. That's budget. You can probably find cheaper than that, to be honest. Or a big kitchen can be a bespoke, handmade oak, hundreds of thousands of pounds. That's a kitchen. They're both kitchens. So, you do have to be aware of what is your level. If you're doing a buy-to-let in Glasgow, that's very different to doing a high-end flip in the southeast or a high-end HMO. Different specs, different things.
Very different specs. I know. We had an experience of a guy who I actually went to see his work, and he was doing a student HMO. And we were wanting to do much, much, much higher spec than that. And when I went to see the quality of the finish that he'd done on that student HMO, it was dreadful. I didn't even think it was good enough for a student HMO. The joins of the door faceplates were not aligned. The painting, you could see little droplets on the walls. Really, really substandard, even for what the market was at that time. But he was really, really fast. So then you've got to decide, well, what's most important? And so you need to make business decisions when you start seeing these builders, meeting them. And I do think you have to trust your gut instinct a lot of the time. My gut's let me down twice, But actually, if I'm being really honest with myself, I probably overrode my gut feeling, or just tried to drown it out, really.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about red flags. I think that's probably what, a lot of our listeners might want to hear about is what should I be looking for? Well, I say it doesn't matter how experienced you are. You have to pay attention to this because you will get caught out if you get a little bit complacent. And it's happened to us more than once. It's happened to other people we know who are very experienced in property. You can get caught out because you're under pressure. You've got a job that needs to be done. You've got somebody that is yeah. And you think, there's a couple of red flags, but we're under pressure. We need to go with it. So you do, and it's never a good idea. So you've got to listen to your gut. It does.
So when we're talking about red flags,
Yeah.
in the questions that we were giving you examples of, like how many staff do you have? Are you a limited company? Are you a sole trader? Things like that. Then if they're a limited company, great. They're going to be a company's house. You can have a little look at their accounts, have a little look at their turnover and how financially healthy their business is. Now, why is that important? Well, lots of builders go bust. And the last thing you want is to give your builder a ton of cash because he says he's further on in the job than he is, and he goes bust and disappears and can't finish the job. That's as bad as it gets, along with you running out of money and not being able to finish a job. So
it's basically, you don't want to be in a position where you are funding their cash flow.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And so a major red flag, anything that looks dubious on company's house, if they're a limited company. If they're not a limited company and it's a smaller operator, that's okay. They're probably a sole trader. If they're a big company and they're not on company's house and they're not limited, you got to raise questions there.
So I was going to say it's harder to check them out if they are a sole trader.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But
it's
a
lot
flag
harder,
would
but you can.
A flag would be, often we've had it where, a builder would ask for 50% up front of the job.
Yeah.
If someone asks for 50% up front of the job, you're basically just funding the cash flow. If you ask them just, well, I've got to buy materials, I'll tell you what, okay, I'll buy the material. If someone's saying they need money up front to pay for materials, I would be very much, well, I will buy the materials then.
Some builders have started to ask for a non-refundable deposit to put the job in the diary, because they have had look, from a builder's point of view, you've got jobs lined up and then one of those jobs doesn't actually start because the client's just changed their mind or doesn't have the money to do it. And then the builder's stuffed. So I do get why they might say a non-refundable deposit to put in the diary, but it has to be a nominal amount. It can't be, a huge percentage of the actual job. I've never done it, but I have heard more and more of this coming into play in the marketplace.
I don't mind that, as long as it's not a massive deposit. If it was a commitment deposit, I think that's okay. Just make sure it's all documented. Make sure you know where you're paying the money to. And that's another important one. A lot of builders and contractors want you to pay bank transfers. Just make sure you are paying into the correct company that you're actually going to be invoicing, that's actually going to be doing the work, not a random company with a different name, or into a personal account. Sometimes you might see that. Avoid that at all costs, paying money into personal accounts, because once it's there, it's gone. To be fair, even if it's a business account, we've had experiences where, the builder has just shut that company down and phoenixed another company with a very similar name and started again. That happens. What we always try and do, particularly on smaller jobs and with individual contractors, is to insist that we pay by card. Because if you can pay by card, and listen, you see this a lot, and we get this loads, and it really frustrates me. And you say to a contractor, "Can I pay by card?" And they go, "No, we can't take card payments." It's like, again, it's not 1975. Anyone can set up a Stripe account that can allow you to take card payments. It's so easy. Or you speak to your bank, if you're a business customer, and go, "I need a point of sale card device." Okay, there it is. It's really, really, really easy. So anyone that says no.
The reasons that they wouldn't use a Stripe account is, Stripe's going to charge me a fee for taking a card payment. And you say, well, I'll pay the fee.
I'm going to pay it. It's 2%.
Because we're talking, it's a tiny little percentage. Because that 2% extra that you're paying is like a premium on payment protection. Because your payment is actually protected, because if you pay them for something and they actually don't follow through on it, or you don't get the goods, or they don't finish the job, then you can dispute that. The credit card company can.
You can dispute it with Stripe. You can dispute it with a credit card company, and and I know that Stripe are quite savage. That they will just deduct it back out of the account if they think it's fraudulent. So anyone can take a card payment via Stripe. It's really not difficult. We have insisted on it on many occasions and said, well, it's deal breaker if you're not willing to set up a Stripe account or get a card payment device, you don't get the job.
It was and it's right down to the guy who was supplying chocolates for the hotel. He was a one-man band, and he was like, oh no, it's bank transfer. I was like, well, sorry, we can't do business together. Suddenly he got a bank credit card reader, and he was like, right,
it's like literally all you have to do is call your bank, or even go online to your bank and order a card reader, a card payment device. It's really that simple.
And again,
I think a lot of people just default to, oh no, it's just cash only, or rather bank transfer only. It's like, well, okay. So that look out for those red flags, and that's how to do with it. I would always default to we pay you by card.
Builders taking card payments, few and far between though, Nick. Come on. I'm thinking of the builders that we've worked with over the years, and it's all been bank transfer, but they are limited companies, and they are into the bank account of that limited company with a contract at the back.
I would say, but if you're not under pressure, if you're ahead of the game and you've got time and you're speaking to lots of contractors, I think you can absolutely make it a condition. It's like, look, I want to pay by card. It's really simple. If you want the job, set up a Stripe account. You can do it in minutes. There's no excuse. It's 2025, people.
No more
yellow pages.
Paying by check.
Yeah. I'll send the carrier pigeon. Yes, right. So other red flags.
Questions, red flags. Well, how long they've been in business, how long they've been doing it. If they're not willing to show you any previous jobs that they've done, if they're willing to give you references, but again, how do you verify those references? We're sounding really cynical here that we're really checking these guys out, and this is where I do the whole trust my gut when I meet them thing. The builders that tend to work on bigger projects, you get a fairly good idea about their personality profile relatively quickly. And you'll get a feel very quickly on if they're the type of people that you can work with or not. Would you say so? I mean, Nick, you basically decide you don't want to work with any builder. You just don't like the building element of it.
If it was up to me, we wouldn't work with anybody. But, I do expect that we have to, let someone into the circle of trust. But yeah, you do have to go on gut feeling. We've worked with builders where you just have a different gut feeling. There's one relatively recently that we knew was excellent in terms of work, loads of good references in terms of work. People spoke highly about his work. But, I remember speaking to a QS and the reaction was quite visceral. It was like you sure, kind of thing. He came out that he was quite difficult to work with. It's like, well, what do we want here? Are you going to be able to tick every single box of someone that's quality work is excellent, but maybe he's a bit of a diva or a bit difficult to work with? Okay, we'll probably take that. Right? If the quality of work is there.
There's certain things that you will compromise on, and there's certain things that are non-negotiables. And I think quality of work, really, it has to be a non-negotiable.
It's got to be non-negotiable. It's got to be the number one. It's got to be, someone's got to have, if you're working with someone that takes pride in their work and wants to do a good job, because, let's face it, most people out there want to do a good job, right? If you've got someone that really wants to do a good job, but they have a personality flaw in a different way, you need to make the choice. Can I work with this person? Or can what? If your team, it's between me and you, can I work with this person? No, but probably I don't have to. Can you, Caroline? Well, yeah, you can put up with that kind of behavior. Okay, fine, let's go with it.
That is how it tends to work with us, is that I deal with the builders. My technique is to try, get them to like me, maybe pity me a little bit for being the silly little girl, and then be a bit of a badass bitch when they step over a line. That's kind of how I've played it on a number of occasions. Has it worked? 9 times out of 10 probably has.
I don't know. I mean, we do kind of good cop, bad cop. Sometimes if you're struggling with something, then I maybe come in and with
the
grumpy face, and maybe get a different dynamic. And sometimes it is a bit of a sexist world, and some contractors are happier talking to a bloke than a female. So that's just reality. You just have to work with what's there. But, don't ignore your red flags. You just have to ask the question, can I work with this person given the red flags? But there are some red flags I think are total non-negotiables. Now, I remember one that we had when we were doing our house. We had the contractor that had a really good reputation in the market. There was just something about him, electrician. And I remember him standing there and saying the words to you, Caroline, hand on heart, I would never rip you off. And it was a red flag to me. Do you remember? And I was like, why would you even say that? Why is that even in your mind to say? And sure enough, it blooming ripped us off.
Yeah, that was the one of my gut feelings that let me down. And it turns out,
We both looked at each other after you said that, and we're like, why do you say that? That's a red flag.
Well, actually, that, bear in mind, we've been in the house over 10 years now. So this is a 10-year lesson. Knowing what we know now, actually, we could have done a company credit search to see how liquid or what state credit file-wise his company was in. And we would have seen how in the red he was and how financially buggered he was.
And he'd closed down other companies with similar names.
Yeah. So we didn't do that. I trusted my gut because he did seem like a nice chap. And I think, desperate people do desperate things. And I don't think at the core of his soul, he was a bad person. He just was in a desperate situation and he just did what was necessary to save his own skin. In the end, it didn't save him at all. And, our main contractor guy had to swoop on in and save the day with threats of fights and all sorts of loveliness in the streets. But, again, the way that they communicate with you and the things that they say, I guess, are indicators. But yeah, he was highly recommended. And we've been stung on 2 occasions, him being one and one more recently, from people who come highly recommended. So this is where, unfortunately, it falls under the uncontrollable, because you're dealing with people. And people can be amazing until suddenly something happens in their personal lives or their professional lives that suddenly leads them to not be amazing anymore. And so they might not set out initially to rip you off or do a bad job or, to overcharge you or whatever it might be. But unfortunately, due to circumstances while they're working with you, then that comes about. And this is why we say, look, you can protect yourself as far as you can possibly go. But because this is a people business and people can change and people's motivations are different, people's moral compass can be different, it's really, really hard to have a checklist that is absolutely foolproof, because you could check off all the items on that checklist and go, yeah, I'm full on in, and still it turns out bad, right? So I guess this is why we have it on the uncontrollables.
It is largely it is uncontrollable to a point. But I think, with in the last example you're talking about, we had some serious red flags and we chose to ignore them. And I think that came from a place of, we have to start this job and this guy is wanting it and he's significantly cheaper than the next one who was even probably, not even really committing, so we were in a place where we kind of, needed to get something going. So we made that decision to overlook the red flags.
Yeah. Well, but also one of the things that helped us overlook it was this strong recommendation from somebody who used
Yeah, and a
him
strong
a lot.
recommendation. It was like, well, we know that person in the market.
That carried
weight.
so much weight
It
for
did
us.
carry weight.
It carried a lot of weight. And I've not actually seen that person who recommended him since. And I tell you, I can't wait. I can't actually wait to see him again, because there'll be no grudge. It'll just be like,
Are you aware of this happening? We're not going to go into huge detail because you probably heard all the stories. But look, there were some major red flags right at the very beginning. I remember saying to you, I don't think I could work with this person. I mean, you literally can't even get a word in. It just talked over you. It was all yeah. It was just like, I don't know how we're going to work with this person.
The issue was, though, what was great was he was a problem solver. So he would come up with solutions to everything we talked about, whereas the previous builder we worked with, he liked to create problems and then be the martyr solution. So I think, again, any kind of previous experience you've had, it does shape your attitudes or your appetites on what you will put up with and what you won't put up with. I think if we had never had the previous experience with Alec, we probably wouldn't have chosen Lawrence. But it's very difficult for us to say that now. Hindsight is 2020, and through that experience, what did we learn? Getting builders and contractors through an agency is just an absolute last resort. We just never do it. Having said that, we've met one absolute gem who came from an agency that we've used subsequently.
Yeah, I think biggest issue with the last one was we had red flags. We cracked on with it, and we probably didn't monitor as strongly as we probably should have done. And so things got hidden that we thought, oh, he's like racing ahead, and he was quick, but the quality work wasn't there. We subsequently found out later, and then that ended up costing us loads more. So it's always your fault, right? It's always our fault.
Yeah,
as the
we've got to take that on the chin.
It's your fault. Okay, you have to own that. So we did, but during that process, we've got an amazing contractor plumber who's going to be our plumber going forward. He really pulled out the stops and saved the day. So you find your gems as you go through this. Yeah. We found a really good joiner who's done work for us after it came to an agency. You identify
Tyler,
the people that you
amazing
go,
Tyler.
That's our person. And then you look after them, and there are really, really good people out there. You might need to kiss a few frogs to find them, but when you do find them, look after them, treat them well, pay them well, and they'll do good jobs for you, ongoing.
Yeah.
So we've met some really, really top-notch contractors, through that process that we would like to keep and work with.
Absolutely. And actually, there are two contractors I can think of now that worked on the job, and their work was excellent, but they took the absolute mickey out of us. And on that basis, you're dead to us. So although we're saying our number one priority is quality of work, we had two contractors where the quality of work was fantastic, but they saw an opportunity to rinse us and they took it. And on that basis, I'm out.
Okay. So I think in summing up, it is something I think a lot of people are getting into this worry about, and probably rightly, is a really important part of the process, but you can't run away from it. Everything that we do really in property, if you want to, make money in property, you really do need to be doing the work. You've got to be the developer. You've got to create the value. So you do need to be able to work with contractors and builders. Take your time. Don't ever be in a position where you're desperate, and take the first one that comes along. Look out for the red flags and ask yourself the question, can I live with this or not?
Yeah. And I think the thing that we've always said in every deal that we go into is, in a worst case scenario, how would that look? If you chose to work with a contractor and it didn't work out, can you recover it? And if if the answer to that is no, then you have to be even more stringent in your choices that you make. But yeah, you have to own every single one of them. Every one of those choices, good and bad.
Yeah. And educate, as I said, you've said it before, educate yourselves. Don't just leave it to chance. Don't leave it, don't defer the knowledge to someone else. It's your job, when you're getting into this, is to understand what you're getting into and what things cost, so that you can understand whether a pricing is good or not. It's your role to it's important to understand it, so that you can make good decisions.
Well, we had a delegate that was based up here in Scotland, had a quote for a buy-to-let renovation, and he posted the quote on our Facebook group and said, guys, can you have a look at this and see if there's any, red flags? And actually, for us that were experienced in the Scottish market, we were like, that pricing looks pretty good to me. I think, that's a great little safety net to just have somebody, put an eye over the quote to give you that comfort.
So if you're looking for a network of people to to be able to have that ability to ask questions and get involved, do come join us. thispropertylife.co.uk. Come check us out. We are meeting up in person in early November in the Manchester area. So do go and look at our website for details of that and how to join us. It would be great to have you with us. So that's the end of our mini series of 4, Controlling the Uncontrollables. Yep. So we need to move on to something else, Caroline. What are we moving on to?
Well, we decided that after the pain of this last development, that actually we were going to take a bit of a break. I like to call it a retirement, but you're not letting me retire
retirement.
Just yet. A mini retirement. But actually, the capital that it takes to do a project like that, a couple of million quid, we're like, how often can you do that? How often do you have the strength and the appetite for that? So we decided, actually, let's diversify and move away from property for a bit and look at other cash flowing assets. And in comes Cody Sanchez, like a little angel into our lives. We heard her on Secret CEO.
Diary of a
What do you
CEO.
call it? That's the one, Diary of a CEO. And then she's been on a couple of times.
Yeah.
And she has a book called Main Street Millionaire.
Okay, so what this is essentially, so I listened to on Stephen Bartlett's podcast, or what she said made a lot of sense. So she buys businesses, but what she calls boring businesses. And that kind of struck a bit of a chord. I was like, okay, interesting. And so this book basically is all about how to buy what she calls boring businesses. So things like laundrettes, businesses that you don't make you go, oh, it's not like tech, it's not like, Bitcoin related or something, right? It's just, it's she also refers to like the kind of Main Street in America, Main Street businesses. So things like, paving companies, garden companies, people who come and jet wash your driveways, things like that. And it's all about, and I read it, and it's so many parallels with property. I thought it was great.
It's identical, all the process.
A lot of people in property think buy-to-let's like pretty boring. Do buy-to-let, it's pretty boring. Well, it's just buy-to-let. It does 300 quid a month cash flow, whatever. And this is kind of really, really similar. But what's great about it is, to identifying businesses that cash flow, that, she has a little model that you run things through, a bit like, the models that you can learn in property, the buy, renovate, refinance model, same kind of thing. And how to structure deals where you can, you can do vendor finance deals. So you can be able to acquire businesses without necessarily having to put loads of upfront money. So all these things kind of really, really appeal. So I said to Caroline, well, okay, look, during our little mini retirement of developments, why don't we try and put this into practice? Well, why don't we identify some local businesses that are boring, quote marks, and see if we can put this into action. Can we implement Cody Sanchez's strategies and acquire ourselves a business in the next 12 months? So that is going to be the subject of our series within a series. We shall be documenting our journey along the Cody Sanchez path to Main Street Millionaire. So yeah, we shall keep you updated and let you know how that goes. We'll go into a little bit more detail on the next one about what the criteria are that we look for and actually how we're putting it into action, because knowledge is one thing, implementation is something entirely different.
Yeah, we have started, and I love it because it is basically property 101 or 102, because it's just in a different industry, but it's exactly the same process. It couldn't get closer.
We're excited, aren't we?
Sanchez is great. Yeah, we're excited about it. But that's because we've actually identified some businesses already that we're like, this looks interesting. But like you say, you've got to kiss a lot of frogs to find your prince. Yeah. So,
but it's, as we teach in property, it's all about action. It's all about getting started and actually moving forward and implementing what you learn, not just reading a load of books and stick it back on the bookshelf. It's like, we pick this one out, right, we're doing this one. So we shall be back very soon with an update on how we're getting on with our new strategy for the next year or two.
Brilliant. If you want to reach out to me on Instagram, I'm carolineclaydon.property, and look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
We'll see you all soon.